There we go. Oh, and that's a lot louder than I thought it'd be. Perfect. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. And yeah, I hope you all had a great weekend. I'm just going to go ahead with attendance, jump straight into it. So if you're here, please say here, present, etc. Catherine Barrett. She on the...
Yeah.
I will wait for her because she might be having issues getting in. Aaron Black, I see.
Here.
Catherine Bullard.
Here.
Jonna Drake.
Here.
Gary Dreith.
Here.
Sarah Hildebrand.
Here.
Lori Ward.
Here.
Sarah Mayer.
Here.
Jordan Pryor here. Mike Scholl. We'll wait on him. Jessica Schneider. Okay. Patty Swiger.
Here.
Marlon Thompson. See you.
Here.
Here.
Natalie Walsh.
Here.
Okay, so
I'm here.
how did I? Oh, I did miss you. I'm so sorry, Ron. Ron Starter is here. I've got like 4 different colors going on in this page right now, so it perfect. Okay. All right. Okay, so she did make it. I'll put a check by her name, and then if you'll keep an eye on. Yeah, thank you, Jessica Schneider. Jeffrey, his wife and one of his daughters is not feeling well, so he's not in today. Okay, so just to go over the agenda, we have some folks with the library. They're going to be presenting today. Super excited about it. We also have our PIO as well. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out who I would make sense. Okay, my bad. But yeah, so we'll have the opportunity to kind of hear y'all's insights on, community engagement, what that looks like, the resources that we can utilize with the city, have time for a little Q&A. And then from there, we will go on to planning next week's agenda and seeing if there's anything that we can apply. So with that, I am going to move to our next item, which is approving last week's minutes. Are there any changes anyone feels needs to be made to last meeting's minutes? All right.
I move to approve last week's minutes.
And I second it. So those are approved. Excellent. All right. That leads us to our next item, something that Mike Scholl had actually brought up last meeting, which is since email comment is attached to the packet, do we want to continue to read it out loud? So I move that we vote to not read email comments out
Can we
loud.
have some discussion first?
Yes.
We need to discuss first. Discussion first before we vote?
Don't we move and then after it's seconded, we talk about it? Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Right. Yeah. I'll make sure that we don't just immediately vote on it. But so I move to not read email comments out loud and to save time on meetings.
Second.
Okay. Commissioner Dreith?
Yes, I think that's a bad idea. I think written public comments need to be read. If they're not read, it's not really public because many people in the public don't know to go on, download our packet, read those. And on first page of our directions here, it says number 3 by video or by email. It says if you want yours read, you send it in. And so it says right there, we'll read them. And if you look back at the times we've had public comment, it's only been less than 15 minutes. It's not a waste of time. We're probably going to spend 15 minutes on this discussion alone. And so I think that definitely we need to continue to have those read because I looked in the packet. I don't believe there's any email comments come in today to read. So I think we're being trivial here and trying to lose the trust of the community by cutting them out. And I don't think we want to do that. I think we need to take that time, read them so that they are public.
Commissioner Walsh?
Thank you. I guess at first I was thinking, if they're in the packet, people can read them, but now I'm hearing what Gary has to say, and I think I have to agree with that,
Mhm.
particularly since it says that in our directions. And then, it's sort of a practice, and we haven't been getting that many email comments, so I'm wondering if we can consider, what I would vote for is holding off until we get so many that
Till
it
it becomes a
interferes too much with our meeting. But I hadn't really thought about what Gary said, and I think he makes a good point.
Do you have something?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think also, okay, that when we. When we get public comment, we need to hold our discussion. I feel like we kind of let that blow up.
Mhm.
And that's not for what it's a comment, and we should continue reading them and then take that into our discussion later, not at that time.
Right. Okay. Anybody have anything else to add? Yes, Commissioner Stoddard.
I think that I would guess that people in the community that are trying to communicate with the Trust Commission, I would be happy to know that the Trust Commission members have read their emails.
Mhm.
The only purpose in reading them out loud, I'm not sure what the purpose is. But certainly, if they want the community to know what they think, they can send a letter to the editor of the Reporter Herald. I think that reading them out loud is redundant and time consuming.
Thank you. I agree.
Hi, this is Commissioner Schneider.
Yes.
Sorry, Chair Pryor. Can I have a moment?
Yes, go for it.
Yeah, I really think that, again, hearing what Commissioner Walsh and Commissioner Dreith said, I agree that, our instructions thus far are that people can email and they will be heard. And I think it's important for us to hear public comment. Putting it in the packet is great, but I also think the community that's joining us should be able to hear our public comment. And there are different reasons why people might need to speak via email. And that's okay. So I am against not reading those out loud. Thank you.
All right. Yes, Commissioner Bullard.
Both sides have really, really good points. I'm remembering the times, especially in the last month or so, going to city council, and they've kind of had that discussion also, if I remember correctly. And for them, public comment in the meeting is they have to be able to see your face. But I don't believe that comments that are not read, just sent via email, I don't think that the public knows what those are. And so at that point, I agree with that. Am I correct, Mr. Adams?
Yes, City Manager.
So the council changed their policy a little while ago on that particular topic. And they've asked now that anybody that has that wants to have something read into the record, that it's sent to a specific email Dropbox that's immediately then sent out to all of council. So they viewed that as them getting it right away, immediately, what somebody wanted to say without having it read in the record at the city council meeting. So your instructions read the way they are now because that's what the rule is now. If you change the rule, then that would let people know that you're changing the rule.
Which would take a
If you
2/3
want.
vote, correct?
I'll let.
Yes, just a clarification. Sure.
So in that same thread, because it says here, it's very specific. If they want their public comments read into the record, the subject line says for public comment. So if we get emails, I'm assuming, if we get emails that don't say for public comment, we don't have to read it, right?
Right, correct.
So I mean, I'm.
Yes.
Commissioner Ward, just to piggyback on that, there may be people who want to write, but don't want it read, right? They want to write to you and you or all of us, but they don't necessarily want it read.
Right.
So.
But yes, city attorney, just to confirm, if we're changing a rule, it has to be a 2/3 vote, correct?
So if you're following Robert's Rules of Order and you want to change it for this evening, it would be 2/3. If you're changing it going forward, just majority vote.
Yes, Commissioner Dreith?
Well, we are not city council here. When city council changed their rules, it was to stifle public comment. They lost a lot of trust in the community by doing that. I think we need to stick with reading it. Like I say, it's not very much. I don't think we have any for tonight. Writing to the letter, the editor or the RH is a bunch of bunk because not everybody subscribes to that paper. And they pick and choose on what they're willing to print. So I think you should discount that as any argument. And we need to continue reading public comment here.
Well, I say with that, let's just go ahead and vote. There is Miss Barrett.
Tell her how to vote when she's.
Hi, Catherine. Well, we will wait until. Just so you know, we're voting on if we want to not read email comments out loud anymore and just keep them in the packets. So, so those in favor of.
Wait a minute. Can we clarify what your motion was?
Yes.
I don't know if you're voting to disband public comment, reading public comment, or to allow it. So I need clarification on what your motion was, please.
We are voting to not read public comment or email comment out loud and instead just keep it in the packet. So all those in favor of.
One quick question.
Yes.
Actually, does that say specifically, please read for public comment?
Yes. Is that?
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we are voting on to not read email comment out loud and instead keep it in the packet only. All those in favor of doing that, please raise your hand. Okay. All those opposed, please raise your hand. All right, the motion does not pass. Okay. All right, with that, we're going to move on to public comments. I'm going to assume none of you have public comment. And Hannah, do we have any phone in comment?
Thank you, Chair Pryor. Callers, if you'd like to speak to public comment, please choose the raise your hand feature or press *9 on your phone.
Yeah. No, you're fine. You're okay. We have a couple people at work.
I do not see anyone, Chair Pryor.
Okay, and I don't believe that we have any email comment either, ironically. Okay, so with that, we're gonna just go on ahead to our PIO presentation.
Hello, can you hear me? Everyone? No? Can everyone online?
Can everyone on Zoom hear the PIO?
Oh, yes.
Yes, okay, they can hear you.
Okay. I forget, I watch this on TV all the time, but I'm taller, so.
If you need one of these, just let me know, okay?
Sounds good. So thank you all for having me. I am Nicole Yost. I'm the city's engagement coordinator and public information officer. I do appreciate the opportunity to share a bit more about the Office of Communication and Engagement and some of the tools and opportunities that we have through our office that might be of interest to the Trust Commission and some of the work that you guys are doing. Before we discuss some of the specific tools that I'm here to present, I did want to briefly introduce you to the Office of Communication and Engagement, our division, and specifically our 2021 Communication and Engagement Roadmap that was approved by City Council in January of 2021. And a bit of history that I think might be helpful for you, your group as well. So before we were known as the Office of Communication and Engagement, we were the Public Information Office. And our focus was really on one-way communication to the public from the city. And I think we all recognize that this model didn't really serve us at the city, nor did it serve the community, because we weren't really allowing for opportunities to hear more from the public. And we really weren't doing enough to communicate and collaborate better with the citizens and the businesses that we serve. So in 2020, that process shifted from the PIO one-way model to this OCE model. And for the last year, our office has really been focused on 4 key areas. So you'll see those here. Building public trust and confidence is the first one. Proactively communicating, collaborating, and engaging. Fostering transparency and inclusive decision-making, as well as positively supporting and managing our brand. And so as a city, we recognized the pain points that existed with that old model. And we also recognized the opportunity to achieve more on behalf of the community. So that process is really what led us to where we're at today. This roadmap has really served over the last year as the starting point, the guide of shifting some of what we're trying to do as part of our efforts. And so I'm going to talk to you about 3 of the individual tools that we use today in the Office of Communication and Engagement. And we can talk a little bit more about what that could mean for your commission. So the first is probably the one that I am the most excited about. It is called Let's Talk Loveland. This is the city's first online engagement platform. It's a tool, it's dedicated to the whole concept of two-way engagement. You can provide information, but there's a lot of built-in engagement tools. And so I'll show you a little bit about kind of what we can achieve with a tool like this. So this tool offers us something that we as a city have never had before, an official and publicly accessible online channel that's meant for two-way communication. And so what I mean by that is our website, we've always had that, well, since websites were a thing, but there aren't really tools within that really allow for engagement. So this is a whole different animal. So what it is you can access this from our website. You can sign up from it directly. All you need is first name, last name, email, screen name. But this is a channel where we build projects, either one-off projects all about affordable housing or metro districts. Or if you were with us a few years ago, we did a lot of work with Pulse, our broadband project. Or we have some longer term projects built into this tool. For example, we have a fact or fake ongoing project with the whole goal of trying to drive the community to this site to ask your burning questions about things happening at the city, questions about services. And the idea is that we will answer these in this publicly accessible forum so the whole community can come here and they can see what else people are asking. They can get answers to some of that. So there's really a lot of opportunity for engagement. And so the goal is really to create a page that we can funnel people to for engagement. Specific to this site, there's a lot of individual tools. So from a project perspective, whenever we're building a project, we really can customize each page. So there's the option to add a survey, Q&As, something called a quick poll. We can create a guest book. So invite people to share their story. If you've been to our affordable housing project, that's one where we've tried to do that. Maps, ideas, and forms. Excuse me. That's what happens when you don't close your water bottle. So some of the projects, I don't know if you guys have been on this page, but we just recently completed our traffic safety study. So we actually created a project for that and built the whole survey on that platform. And it was a really cool use of the tool because there's a mapping feature on that tool where we can work with our GIS team to kind of create a map and allow people to take some sort of action, put their name, answer questions. The Q&A function, all of this is public, so we can open up a forum, almost like an FAQ, and invite the community to ask us what questions do they have and have a set place to answer those. Like I said, surveys, ideas. So if you guys are seeking ideas from the public on certain topics or what we can do better, all of that is built into these kinds of tools. So that's why it's been a great tool for us so far, and we're only growing and building it. So we have almost 13,000 people who we are engaging with through this kind of platform. And we're putting more effort in this year to continue to grow, to build, to generate awareness for the tool so that it can keep being a valuable opportunity for us. And then one of the great things about this tool is how we report on the back end. So for social media measurement, for website measurement, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of analytics on the back end that you can take a look at. What this tool does is it formalizes that into usable data, such as how many people who have visited this project are aware, how many of them are actually informed, and how many of them have done enough actions on our page to where we consider them to be engaged. So that's a neat way to look at the data and try and figure out and continue to work to communicate with them to help us build creative content or help us give them tools to help the public with what they need. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Nicole. Good to see you, by the way.
Yes.
I just had a data question. When you're like, how deep does that data go? I mean, can you see like from like people's IP address if they're from Loveland or from? I mean, are you just relying on the honesty of the submitter? That they're
Sure. So we can customize the back end a little bit more. So we would probably have to call Bang the Table, the platform who does this, to help us with some of those details. But what we did for the Pulse project is we have a whole list of questionnaires ahead of time. So we asked people what ward they lived in, what age group they identified with, a lot of things that helped us look at and see, are we actually reaching people throughout our community, or are we very heavy in one part of our community, and how can that help guide us to try and do more proactive efforts to drive engagement and get people from the other parts of the community that we want to engage with? How can we hyper focus almost on some of those and bring them into the tool? Is that helpful? You're welcome. And so we can actually come back to this one, but I would be interested to hear from the commission about if and how we could make a trust commission project for this group. That's something, as I've been looking at our tools, it seems like there could be some robust options, almost creating an one-stop shop landing page. So would love to discuss that a little bit more. So the next thing I wanted to quickly talk about is we do surveys. So we have a variety of tools to conduct surveys on our own, but we do surveys, citywide surveys. We've done them every 2 years. You can access our past survey data on our website under communication and engagement. So our last survey, citywide quality of life survey, was 2018. So of course, we did not do a survey in 2020 or 2021, but we are gearing up to do our next survey this year. And what's exciting about the process this year is we are contracting with Polco and the National Research Center to do their national community survey for the first time. And what's so great about this survey and this particular tool is it allows us to not only get feedback from our community, but it allows us to benchmark that data. They have over 500 different municipalities and jurisdictions that they work with that allows us to benchmark our data with like-minded cities. So not only are we hearing and understanding our community and recognizing that that's unique, but it allows us the additional opportunity to benchmark and use that data to move forward. So we're in the contracting process with them. One sec. And we probably will start launching that this summer. Most of those questions are pretty standard questions in order to benchmark. We have a small number of questions that we are able to customize through the survey, and that is a plan that we have. And Patty, did you have a question? No problem.
I know.
We're supposed to have them at the end, but I let Mike slide, so I'll let you slide too, Patty.
Two questions though. When will this survey be finished so that it'll be available to the public?
Certainly. So based on the contracting process right now, we anticipate launching the survey early summer. So I believe we should have metrics potentially early fall. I can double check on that.
And is the public safety survey part of this?
The one that PD does?
Is that separate?
That is a separate.
That is a separate one.
Yeah,
Okay.
so theirs is very focused on that end. We do have public safety questions built into our survey, just like we have utility-based questions and really a broad range of questions in this survey to help us truly understand citizen feedback on that.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
From 2 years ago, it did have a lot of questions that the answers would really pertain to what we're all about, satisfaction with the PD. It was broken down, the demographics were broken way down to districts and to age groups and to there's more that was broke down to. So it helps with, okay.
I just want to understand what your answer was, if you may. So you kind of, because I don't have the background for the question that she asked and nobody clarified it. You answered something and so we're saying that's someone else's survey. So that's not part of something you do?
No, so the public safety survey that Patty was mentioning was a biannual survey that the police department does. And I believe it's part of their accreditation process. So that, I think they're planning on doing something later this year with that as well.
Okay, okay.
And that's outside of the scope of what you do?
Correct, yes, that is something that's handled by the police department and their public information office.
Okay, and how do we know that? I mean, how do we know that? I mean, I know what you know that, but how do we as the public know that?
That is a great question. I know that they have that as a section on their website, but that is certainly an opportunity for us.
To clarify, okay.
Yes.
I will have a question, but I'm going to wait till the end because I am part of the corner.
Yes, I was just going to say, unless you guys have a clarifying question, let's let Ms. Yost
All right.
finish.
Final slide, guys, promise. Okay, so the last tool that I wanted to talk through today was town halls. And this is part of the roadmap and our Office of Communication and Engagement. We first started our town halls last year. So we did 4 last year, again, led by our office, facilitated by the library using their Harwood model. And we have 3 anticipated town halls coming up in 2022. Now, there could be an option to add additional town halls, but as far as planning goes, we've tried to plan out a few dates in advance. We have one topic already secured, but the goal of our town halls is really to help Loveland residents connect with their representatives and discuss topics of importance to them. So I don't know if any of you have attended our town halls. They have been all virtual so far, just due to the climate. But we have conducted ours through Zoom. And so basically what it is, it's an hour and a half that we set aside. We have a topic that we decide on based on, we've decided based on public input. We asked people on our Let's Talk Loveland page some of the things that they care about. Some of it has been related to council priorities. So what we're looking for the most when we're doing town halls is how can we bring the public together with city council listening through the town hall in a facilitated manner to where there's an educational component where we can help educate the community on a topic and then give them space in facilitated breakout sessions to learn and understand. And then we produce a report at the end of every town hall summarizing some of the key concepts. And for us, the goal is for those to be actionable. We want to come into a town hall and say, help us understand how you're feeling so that we can package that and decide the best path forward, whether that's providing that information to council to help them with their decisions, whether it's helping staff with a key topic that matters to us and helps us do a better job of communicating to the public. So those are really the goals of our town halls. And then we also use the Let's Talk Loveland platform as much as we can ahead of our town halls to create projects. We try to get engagement ahead of time. If there's a lot of information to understand a topic like affordable housing, we have our presentation during the town hall, but then we also try and do some education work through a Let's Talk Loveland platform ahead of time to just really help the public have access to the tools and the information they need for a productive conversation. So with that, I would love to answer any more questions that you have.
Yes, Commissioner Barrett.
Just so 13,000 is impressive. Love everything that you said. Do you have anything in mind to grow that?
Yes, we do. And we recognize that Let's Talk Loveland platform has grown a lot from those who have been interested in specific topics. We did a city update announcement last May, introducing the community to what that looks like. But I think where we've been seeing a lot of that growth is the project specific opportunities to engage has really driven more people to do that. But we are planning to market that a lot more. We are going to be launching a citywide monthly e-newsletter. Our office, we're out in the community way more than the PIO office ever was. So last summer we were at 13 different events. And so we have email signups, Let's Talk Loveland signups as much as we can, because the goal is, we're really trying to bring people in. So we're working on doing more to market that and drive that growth. You're welcome.
Commissioner Black.
Hi, thank you. I have two questions, Nicole, and it was great meeting you last week, and that was a great presentation. Thank you. One is the Let's Talk Loveland page, is that also in, I've looked at it and I haven't noticed that it's also in Spanish. Is there a possibility that we can have a Let's Talk Loveland page in Spanish?
Thank you for that question. So all of our Let's Talk Loveland pages, at the very top, there is a Google Translate button. Any language that Google Translate supports, those users can go to that, select the language, and then the platform automatically translates that. If there is a need for non-Google Translate options, that's certainly a conversation that we can have to make sure that the project is doing right by what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, thank you. And I would think it would be nice though for that page to at least have that mentioned on the page, that if you're looking for, a change in language or whatever, that where to go on the page to change that on that button. I think that would be nice. My second question is, you spoke about town halls. Is there going to be language justice offered for those as well in Spanish for our Spanish speaking population?
Thank you for that question as well. So I will take note of that addition to the Let's Talk Loveland page. That's a great addition for content. So I'll have my team take a look at that. For our town halls, our current process is if somebody needs language assistance, they can call a specific number at the city. All that's available on our accessibility webpage, but we currently are not offering those with translators right out of the gate. That's a request option at this moment. It's something that we are looking into though, and we recognize there's an opportunity to do more.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Scholl, then Commissioner Stoddard.
So thank you for the presentation. Actually, I really like this engagement tool. I've seen it used in my work profession. And I just had a question because I recently responded to one of the engagement tools that I believe is the traffic one. And that was, I'm assuming, through the Public Works Department. Would that?
Sure. So our office, we actually manage that tool for all of our departments. So what we do is we work with them if they have a project, and we collaborate with them on how to make a successful project. And then we work together on that. But yeah.
Well, you kind of beat me to my punch, my leading question. So thank you. So I guess the question I have is if the city is engaging in or investing in building this kind of communication infrastructure that's being used across the Loveland Fire Rescue, Public Works, I'm assuming the planning development, why are the police different? Why are they not part of that integrated community engagement?
Sure. And I will say we have had some initial conversations with PD, especially as they have their working groups working on how to communicate and engage better. There has been the conversation of working with them on using this tool in addition to working on more robust web pages for themselves. So there's certainly that conversation. So I know as they're looking at building out that plan, we'll keep having that conversation. And if that is something that works for them to meet their needs, then we'll certainly work with them to get that up and running.
Okay. Real quick, Commissioner Starr, right before you go, Aaron you did turn your hand off. Okay, never mind. I was going to see if you just left it on. Okay, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Very impressive. Very impressive. Thank you very much. I'm particularly interested, I guess, in the representation from the community that is actually involved. 13,000, again, I think is a great start. Do you have any demographics? You indicated that the questionnaire, when people signed up, included what ward they were in and what age group they identified with. I identify with, a teenager, but that may not be appropriate. What kind of demographic information do you have about the people that are involved? And I guess my concern is that there's that silent majority out there that just doesn't get involved. And I'm wondering how effective this program and others are in terms of reaching them. I always thought that maybe the utility bill, the little newsletter that's in there would be a great place to do it. Give them a $5 credit if they sign up.
Thank you for that. So first off, demographics, we do have that for some. Some of our projects launched without demographic data. And the reason for that was when we first launched the program, we had gotten some feedback from other communities that there was hesitancy in people signing up for the program. And so it was helpful to launch with that. But what I will do is I'll go back and take a look at what we do have. Meeting your other question, I completely get that. There are those in this community who are very engaged. We're also looking at, this is an online engagement tool right now. So if you think about it, how many people in our community have no desire to engage online? And so those are some of our larger efforts that our office is looking at is what are our online engagement opportunities to allow those who want to engage with us in that way to do so. And then how can we continue looking into and building ways to engage our community where they have no interest in going to a website and typing for us? So how can we build that? The town halls, that model, as I mentioned, it's a digital model currently because of the pandemic, but we certainly have interest in moving that into an offline format as well. So we're continuing to look for options to engage those in our community who might not want to be online. And we're doing that currently with some of our engagement events, trying to be thoughtful on making sure we're hearing from the seniors in our community, the families in our community, some of the others. And I know the library is going to speak more, but any opportunity we have to partner with them to help with engagement, we are always looking at that.
I like the idea of partnering with some of the groups, and I would assume that maybe the churches in the community would be a target, as well as service clubs and other special interest organizations. So I think that's great.
Thank you. And yes, we're continuing to grow all those groups. We've got big visions, so it'll happen. We are working on it, but keep the feedback coming. It's really helpful for us.
All right. Just so everyone knows the order, it's Hildebrand, Walsh, then Schneider.
Oh, okay.
Okay, then Commissioner Walsh, you're next. I'm adding you to the list.
Thank you. Your presentation is excellent and you're a really good public speaker.
Thank you.
I want to compliment you on that. To tell you the truth, I actually think that what you're doing is what at the status report that Jordan tried to give City Council in January, what they decided they really wanted. And so I'm a little curious if City Council is aware, if you've done a presentation to City Council yet.
So since we launched the roadmap, we have not been in front of council to talk through, but we, and there's a link on our website. So my former boss, Justine Bruno, she presented, and that is on our website. So if you want to go back through and see what that feedback was, but we have not given them a status report, of course, on that. It has been an interesting year for us. And so we are, we've provided status reports, I think, to staff, not officially to council, but you're right. I think that would be valuable to get some feedback from them as well on those efforts, where we've been, where we need to go, and what we're working on to get there.
Yeah. So, and I might probably, when we get to our recommendations for our final report in September, mine will be along those lines that, the City Council should support this effort. I think it's really good. Obviously, everything can be adjusted and grow, but I don't think you need a separate commission to do what you're already doing. And you guys are obviously professionally more capable than someone like me to do something like that. So that's going to be probably a recommendation, but that was just my question, whether City Council was aware, of you. And I think it should be. I do kind of want to follow up on Mike, on Commissioner Scholl's question about, is LPD, incorporated into you or not? And if, I don't mean like you should know the answer for this, but I'm just wondering if, because from, at the time that this commission was formed, that it was born out of an incident. And if you think that this engagement project would be an appropriate place for something like if the people in town wanted to have a public engagement on, what happened to this citizen, if that would be something that would fit. I'm addressing the obvious, elephant in the room, which I tend to do. But is that just like way not something that that this office would address, because that, there's the let's everyone be friends, trust building, activities for positive engagement, which everyone wants and does in their individual lives. And then there's trust issues because something happened that was upsetting, and people want to talk about that too. And they do want to engage in that. And I think that, to me, the Trust Commission was put together to give that extremely human response to an awful thing some structure. And so I'm trying to figure out if this would, what happens if that's the engagement that people want? And maybe putting it another way is, you were talking about it, you could work with LPD to see if you could support them, but it's more, does it support the community's interest in the issue, whether or not LPD, wants the community to talk about it, because I don't think they do, but people do.
Sure.
So I don't know if I'm being very clear, but it's a little bit of picking up on what Mike was saying, in the sense of, does that fit in the garage there?
And that's a great question. So I will say, when we look at trust and transparency, and when you look at our roadmap, we recognize there's engagement when it comes from just telling the positive stuff. But we really look at it, and in the roadmap, even it's, we recognize that there's opportunity to be the first to say, hey, guess what? We did not do great. Let's fix it. So I think that's in the roadmap that we're operating off of. That's certainly, part of that vision. We are a decentralized organization, and maybe our city manager can speak more to that. And that was one of the things we recognized with this plan, was because we're decentralized, some of our different departments have their own communications and marketing teams, whereas, we oversee a lot of the city communication. But one of the things that came out of this roadmap was, we've got to do better at making sure our departments are talking to each other, and that we are being more collaborative. And we have been doing a really great job of that this year. We have what's called a communication steering committee internally. So anyone who touches social media, community engagement, media relations, the website, all those public channels, we meet every other month to do trainings, everything from, the First Amendment and social media, to getting our teams together to make sure that we are all working off of that very similar communication philosophy. And it's going really well, I think, so far this year. But again, we are in that first year of the plan. And I know that there's some excitement for what we can continue to achieve there. Steve, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Thank you.
So,
Sorry.
thank you, Commissioner Wood, for your questions. They're great questions. One of the things that we've been working on is some of you have been giving up extra time to be in one of our 5 work groups with the police department. So working with, and you're going to hear from the library in just a minute, PIO and the library, we're working on our first outreach event from the 5 groups out into the community. And that is the first time we've kind of done that. So we're all learning something new here with that process. The second thing is, in the communication, particularly related to police department, a lot of that coordination is coordinated through the PIO here and at the police department, because there's a lot of things that result in, if issue a press release, we need to know about it too, because the public is asking us, which is larger than just the police department's public. So that coordination is also ongoing between the groups, and it's more of a joint action group that we have right now, and all that communication with the police department. So there's been a lot of work done on that. Some of that was not in place at the time, but it's been developed over time.
Just a follow-up. Thank you, both of you. I'm not sure who. Is what City Manager Adams described part of what you're describing, or is that a separate?
Well, I would say I think they're aligned. So the the efforts that we're working on. So after the assessment, LPD came together to create 5 different subcommittees to work on how to, what the implementation plan will be to achieve some of these recommendations. And so I know some members of the Trust Commission, are on the communication and engagement one. I sit on both of those as well, direct with the PIO for the police department. So the city and PD, we're working very hand in hand on this next phase of that project.
Okay, I think my questions were directed, thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
My questions were corrected towards this tool that we've been describing, the platform where there's community engagement. And so, for example, like one of the questions people had that you don't have to answer. I know you don't know the answer and you don't get to tell us anyway. But one of the questions everyone had was, how come it took so long for the city to know about the Karen Gardner arrest and the incident surrounding that? So that would be something that people are talking about out in the community, and that was a trust issue. And so people would, and I'm not really looking for the substantive response to that, but to understand that when we're talking to people, is that what this tool would be for? And like, so that we understand what it is. And again, I'm saying, that was a specific thing. Is this tool designed for that type of engagement?
Yes, so great question. So the tool is specific to whatever project we want, whatever goal we have for the engagement, what we want to hear from the community. This tool can help us do that. So kind of going back to your question, years ago when we did the Pulse communication and engagement campaign, we recognized there were a lot of tough questions that people were going to ask us about that, but we opted to open up the Q&A feature through Let's Talk Loveland to give the community a platform to ask us the tough questions. And we made that commitment to respond, and of course there are some questions that can't be answered, but it really is designed to allow that to kind of live. So there's tools within that platform that allow for that.
All right, Commissioner Schneider, and then we have a list. It's Schneider, Barrett, myself, Hildebrand, Mayor.
Thank you, Chair Pryor. And thank you, Nicole, for your presentation. I really appreciate it. I am excited to hear about the opportunities for communication in the community. Let's Talk Loveland, these other things. I think those are really important. I am a little bit embarrassed to say that I did not know about Let's Talk Loveland. I haven't engaged with it, and that's probably my fault. But I wonder how many other people might be in the same boat. So I guess my question, one comment, connection and transparent communication does create trust. And we really need that. And that's why I'm here, sitting on this commission. Is there like an ad spend on Facebook for Let's Talk Loveland where we can engage people who aren't that in tune with the city? I guess is my first question.
Thank you. We do have a small ad spend in our division for all things as part of the marketing efforts that we're looking to implement later in 2022. That is absolutely something that we're considering as part of our strategy. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. And I also appreciate other commissioners bringing up Spanish language, other languages. I'm also always interested in sign language or, translation opportunities for the deaf or hard of hearing. I do think, and this is not a criticism, this is not a criticism of you. It is a criticism of our process as a community. I think it is not welcoming to make people who need translation services in any capacity have to request that from the city before a meeting. Because that's like 3 levels of being engaged when but people are busy. So I just want to point that out and just say I think it's important as far as building trust. Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. And that is a conversation our communication steering committee is going to be having even as early as next week or the following week. We recognize our community is changing. We recognize that this us shifting to be the Office of Communication and Engagement really opens the door for us to realize where we can continue to improve. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I really appreciate your work.
Commissioner Barrett.
Thank you again. I'm really excited that you're here, and I think it's going to be wonderful working with you. And I look forward to that very much. You've already got about 17% of Loveland engaged, if you look at the numbers. And I don't know if you're like a polling diva or anything like that, or a guru, but is there a magic number where that becomes statistically relevant that you know of, or can we find that out?
We can find that out.
Thank you.
I know that I've been looking at that for some of the other work that we're trying to do.
If I could, since I went to graduate school in part for that, it's not the number that's as important as how it's collected. And so from a statistical significance, it would be really hard to extrapolate a ton. I mean, you can, because obviously there's a lot of people, but if you're talking about kind of statistical significance, you have to be very mindful of how you engage, randomized or different group. I mean, and I'm not trying to belittle that, but because I do think it's what you're doing is great, and I agree, but I just don't want to get hung up in that part of it.
All right. I have 3 rapid fire questions for you. Okay. One is really just a clarification. So on Let's Talk Loveland, we can go in and we can see all the old surveys and all the old projects. Those are all still there in that database, correct? Okie doke.
Let me clarify. I believe they are. I will check.
Got it. Okay. You had also mentioned earlier with the surveys that there could be a potential for collaboration. So, I am just kind of curious, what does that look like? Would we be able to, if we as a group were able to decide on 2-3 questions that we would also like asked, would we be able to get that in on the survey?
So theoretically, I would say maybe not 2 to 3. We're severely limited in the number of custom questions that we're allowed to do. And so what I would like to do is suggest we look at the questions that are already on there and see, everything we need to do, but, we will certainly continue that conversation.
Okay, perfect. And then my last question, and this is just me being nosy. You had mentioned earlier that there had been discussions about LPD possibly getting on Let's Talk Loveland. Where exactly did that go? Why did that not happen? Was it just too soon?
So those conversations are part of this committee process that we're in. And so they really started in the last few weeks as those committees have started to really uncover how they can most effectively achieve their goals through the communication and community engagement efforts with the resources that they have, or deciding what additional resources they might need for that. So those have all been part of this. What new tools, what new ways do we need to rethink that? So that is why you haven't seen anything from that yet, is those conversations are continuing. So I'm not 100, I don't know when the next update on that will be, but I know we are continuing to talk about it.
Perfect. Thank you. City Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. But one part of this is the creation of a communication plan, which is one of the specific recommendations of the Jensen Hughes report. And that's part of what's being worked on with this team. And I imagine it would have embedded in it some of these recommendations that are
perfect
about tonight.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have Hildebrand and Mayor, and then if time permits, Vic and Scholl.
Thanks for coming back to me. But so I had 2 questions, but one is, so I've used Google Translate and I hate it. I'll like not use it. And so I wonder if anybody, like if a Spanish speaker has like worked with the city and read how Google decided to translate your pages. And I also know when I've used it, sometimes one page will be translated, but then like the deeper pages won't be translated. So did you have a Spanish speaker check those pages to make sure that they're easy for like actually translated well, or?
I don't have a full answer for you on that. Since I have been with the city, March 22nd will be my year. Woohoo! I do know that we check annually on what are the right tools. That may be a great question for our library team. They actually do a lot of the Spanish language translation for the city. And I think the need is growing with that, but that is a great thing for me to take note of for us to work on. And thanks for your feedback on Google Translate. It's helpful.
Vice Chairwoman.
Hey, thank you.
Oh, you had a follow-up, sorry.
I'm sorry.
No,
There's
you're
really
fine.
Kind of two clarifiers, but the other one was the one that Commissioner Walsh brought up because, and this is my personal agenda. So, but I've always wanted to have a conversation with the city about the police pursuits. And I've tried with the police and it doesn't work. And like we're on that same committee. So I'm understanding like there's definite roadblocks in communication between citizens and the police that are just going to be really hard to surmount. But it feels like to me, the city might be like a perfect go-between so that citizens on some of these harder topics could have a conversation where you can bring more to the table than just the police's story, so that we can have like kind of a shared conversation without it like done respectfully. But I just, when you were talking about let's talk Loveland and your town halls, and then Commissioner Walsh brought up the harder topics, I just thought like that might be a really incredible way for the citizens to be able to voice opinions that may not be popular with leadership. And so kind of a question and kind of not a question.
Thank you for that question comment. And actually, we will take note of that as well. So I talked a little bit about our town halls, but I think a lot of what you'll hear from the library, they're doing a lot of really unique things, very similar to some of that, that could be of interest. So I don't know if they'll, I know, I was gonna say that they're itching. Yeah, and I was gonna say that there's I think a lot of things that they'll bring to the table that might meet your needs in addition to what we bring to the table.
All right, I have two things for you. First, have any of the past surveys had anything brought up on them to do with trust or mistrust in the city?
I will need to look, but great question.
And then you said actionable things. So could you give us some actionable items that would help us help you with the Let's Talk page for us, right?
Yeah, and I apologize. I should have spent more time looking at, is it 7 things that you guys are trying to accomplish? Pillars, 8 pillars. I should have spent more time refamiliarizing them. But I think one of the first steps for us to move forward on that is really just taking a look at what do you want to do? You got 7 pillars, you got, until September. What are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? Who are we trying to reach? Just all those basic communication questions. Get back to the basics of all of that and then figure out the content that we'll need to build your page. I think it'll be very easy for us to link all the YouTube videos that are on our YouTube of all your meetings. So those will all be in one place. We can easily link to your page from Civic Web on there as well. So that'll be more easily accessible for folks. And then I think we just need to figure out, in order to get what you need to get by when you need to get it, what's the best way to use this platform? There's a survey tool built into that. And I'll keep going back to the broadband project just because I feel like we used all the tools for that, but it was a Q&A piece. We used that survey tool. We did quick polls over the course of 6 months as we were feeling like perceptions might be changing, but we were kind of using that to drive feedback on certain things as we move forward. So bottom line, it's coming together and kind of deciding what's the goal, what's the timeline, and how do we accomplish what we need to accomplish? And then we'll get to work.
I direct a question at you. Okay, so how do we schedule that? And who needs to be involved? Let's get on it.
Okay, I like it. I will
Check.
put that
Check things
down.
off.
Okay, while I'm writing down that note, Commissioner Vick has a question for you.
Who moderates all the discussions and picks what questions are answered?
On Let's Talk Loveland. So in theory, they're all answered. I do recognize there's I actually went back through it yesterday. And the ideas one, I did notice there's a few questions from the last few days we have not answered, but our OCE team, we get a notification anytime somebody comments on any project. And the whole reason that this tool works is that every single touch in from the public, there's a touch back out. Even if it's, we're working to find that information, or that information will be presented to council, in April, check back, and we try and manage that.
That all comes through your office?
Mhm.
The base of my question, like city council office person, anybody can't pop in and give their politically correct answer. You see what I'm saying? I mean, is it truly an open discussion that's not moderated, like don't answer that, you can't answer, other than legal stuff? I understand that, but that's the base of my question. Let's Talk Loveland. If we want to get into all these topics, who moderates that? Who decides, yep, answer that, don't answer that?
So what we usually do is when it comes into our office, we work with the subject matter experts within the city. So we get a lot of questions about economic development. Is there a grocery store? What are you doing with Albertsons? And so we go to economic development and we say, hey, this is a common question. What's going on? And then we work to package that, and we try to do it in a conversational way versus, but it really is us working with our subject matter experts to help us accurately answer those questions as fast as we can back to the community.
Last question is Commissioner Scholl.
Thank you. I could answer that Albertson's question, by the way. If anyone wants to know, I've answered it many, many times. So I kind of want to revisit the discussion. I think that kind of where Commissioner Walsh and I were kind of probing around a little bit, because one of the things that I'm a little unsatisfied, and it's not anything to do with you, because I do appreciate your presentation, but there's a difference between communication and engagement. And I think that part of I can understand the need for the Loveland Police Department to have a communication, if there's something is going on, or, a chemical truck flips over, something where you need to communicate to the public. But engagement's different. And I think part of what I'm just a little bit unsatisfied, and I think to some degree, to me, it's a leadership question, is if the police department is going to be part of the city, then they should be part of the engagement process that the city government has created. And I'm not saying they're not, but I didn't get a sense that maybe that's an open question. And so, it's not something you need to really answer. It's more of a comment, but I do think that I recognize the need that departments are going to have, for various reasons, their independent communication with the public. But engagement, as a city, it would really cause me to question kind of the trust if 90% of the city and all the departments have to be provided the engagement, but then the police department has its own. And why would that be? And so that, I think I would just kind of encourage you, I would encourage the city manager to kind of really think hard about how you integrate that, because I do think that, it should be part of the city's engagement infrastructure, which I think is good. And I think you're doing a great job with it. So I just want to give you more work. That's all.
I hear you.
And if I may follow up with that, I think we keep an eye on it. And if they don't, if they don't get something set up with Let's Talk Loveland and don't have that engagement, then we make that a recommendation at some point. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time, Ms. Yost. And I don't know if you plan on sticking around or not. If you don't, is there any way that you could maybe drop off one of your cards with either Hannah or Steve? So then that way I can email you and answer one of the questions that my vice chairwoman directed towards me.
That sounds great. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. All right.
Oh, I am not as tall.
That's okay.
Can everybody hear me? Up here? All right. Well, thank you, commissioners, for having us this evening. And thank you to Nicole. She is such a wonderful bridge for us at the city to the public. So I'm very thankful that she went first this evening and I think answered a lot of those bigger questions. So my name is Amber Green and I am acting director at Loveland Public Library. When I am wearing my everyday shoes, I am the teen services manager. So Ronald, this presentation might be to your channeled inner teen and connect right directly with you because that's my typical audience. I'm also here with Amy Phillips, who is our adult services manager. So today, let's see if we can move this guy forward. Whoop. Here we go. We're going to talk to you about how the library is turning outward to connect with community and to build a civic culture. And I think Commissioner Scholl, this might be the engagement piece that you're speaking to, by using a community conversations model. So what this model allows us to do is really to listen to, learn from, and work with the community on a range of issues that matter to them, not just issues specific to the library, but local issues in Loveland. So what we'll do is we'll just briefly look at what this method is, why it's effective, and how we have used it locally in Loveland. So community conversations is based on the philosophy that it is very easy as an organization to be turned inward, and that to turn outward takes intentionality. And to really make time to listen to what matters to people, you have to make sure that you are not promoting yourself or your initiatives at the risk of missing out on a wealth of public knowledge. It was developed by the Harwood Institute. It's been in practice for the past 30 years in all 50 states and 40 different countries. And it has a track record of tackling tough social problems by bringing people together to create a shared understanding and to inspire change. Some of the examples of ways that it is currently being used is by United Way in neighborhoods across the world to have conversations about housing, healthcare, and transportation. In the city of Detroit, to have conversations about safety and economic development and the aspirations that people have for themselves and their families. And in Alabama, to tackle the topic of education reform. So some pretty big issues. It's also being used successfully in thousands of libraries across the country. So what we found, our libraries lend themselves really well to this type of work. We are historically seen as neutral, welcoming places for everyone. We have a lot of community partnerships that represent a diversity of voices. And we have trained and dedicated public service staff that are great at building these relationships. And some of them do speak Spanish. So we've had these conversations in Spanish as well. So how does it work? We have trained conversation leaders. So that's people like myself and Amy, and we use a really specific meeting format. So we have a series of ground rules. We have very small breakout sessions. We ask a list of tailored questions that really dig into a topic. And what this does, it allows people to not just share, but also really listen to each other. And we are able to take from these small, we call them kitchen table discussions, themes that we are then able to put into a qualitative data report and share out with our stakeholders. So Looking at this and how we have used it locally in Loveland, we have had conversations about Loveland's community aspirations. We have had a conversation with our city council to identify their priorities. We have had conversations on the topic of safety and on the topic of youth vaping, both from the perspective of our tobacco retailers and our youth and families who have been impacted by the use of tobacco. And we've had many conversations to inform the library's own strategic plan. We have future conversations planned. One is a listening session with the Loveland Police Department. We have a series for youth planned in April, and we also are supporting the town halls, as Nicole mentioned. So to conclude, these community conversations are great at building relationships. They allow citizens to really talk about their aspirations, their concerns, and to share ideas for solutions on topics that matter to them. And I'm going to turn it over to Amy, and she is going to dig a little deeper into an example of how the library has turned outward to connect with community in support of equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives. And then we will answer lots of questions.
So in 2020 and 2021, there was a large movement to create programs around cultural diversity, equity, and inclusion to support Black, Indigenous, and other people of color or BIPOC groups. The Loveland Public Library wanted to respond to the need we saw within our community. We wanted to do it in a thoughtful way that addressed Loveland's particular needs and not just adopt something from another city that had been successful there. We also wanted to build on what we had heard from our community conversations where people said they wanted to see more diversity in Loveland. With this in mind, we actually decided to use a different tool to turn outward. This process that we used is called ULab. ULab is part of the Presencing Institute, which is affiliated with the MIT Sloan School of Management. ULab uses a process called appreciative inquiry and action research. Appreciative inquiry is just a fancy word for asking open-ended questions to people to find out what their worldview is, what they're experiencing, and their perception of needed change. And action research means that we take what we heard from the interviews and put it into action. Our goal for this project was multiple goals. We wanted to shift the cultural climate within Loveland to be more inclusive. We wanted to assist community members in becoming more aware of inclusion, diversity, and racial equity. And we wanted to share the outcomes of this racial equity prototyping and implementation process to the community. So what we did was we formed a core team, and we did it with groups across Loveland. This included a representative from Thompson School District. We had a representation from the Salvation Army, Heart and Soul, and our Youth Advisory Commission had a representative. And we also worked with Homeward Alliance. So we tried to get a diverse viewpoint across Loveland particularly. This core team then sat down and we identified groups that we wanted to interview. We ended up interviewing 15 stakeholders from the BIPOC community in Loveland and Fort Collins. And the reason we did that across those two cities is many times we will work with somebody in Fort Collins because they have a program that's not available in Loveland. So if you're wondering why we went outside of the borders, that was why. But we also interviewed people from the Loveland business community and also one of our service groups as well. The goal of these interviews were to explore the current reality of equity, diversity, and inclusion in Loveland, what was emerging in the way of EDI in Loveland, and also the changes that people saw as they tried to work with EDI, and also what were some of the steps that you could do to facilitate this. We took the responses and we analyzed them to find common themes and comments. We then created a report that focused on what we had heard, and this was specifically for the library. So it was how we could assist the community as the library with EDI work. we presented the report back out to the people we interviewed. We felt this was really important because we wanted to make sure that we had heard them correctly. And then once we got their feedback, we finalized the report, and the report was approved by our library board in December. And in the report, we also specified what steps the Loveland Public Library could do to assist the work of EDI in the community. And we recommended 3 projects that we could start to begin a prototype for. And give you an idea, because of starts and stops, because of COVID, and also the time of the individuals on there, this did take us about 9 months to do. The recommended time frame for some of this is about 3 to 4 months, but I do want to give you an idea of how long it took us. Our next steps are actually going to be returning to this ULAB process to talk with groups to find out more specific information. We have this overview of what possible prototypes we could have, but we want to dig deeper. We're going to select one of them and start to work on it. And then we'll go back and re-interview some of the groups and things and say, okay, you talked about, one was a data hub to help people with grants and also a clearinghouse. Another one was mobile outreach. What does that look like? And come back to that. And so that we truly can decide what actions we want and to make sure it is community driven. So, and that is, as Amber said, we do this in multiple formats. Yeah. So
Fair enough.
Amber and I can answer questions.
So we'll go Natalie, then me. I was going to go first, but you got it.
Thank you both. This is really excellent to hear. So one of the things that I really appreciate the presentations, and you guys packed a lot into these 2 parts. And so I have an observation. I think it's just, that's sort of a question too, is, this community, the other part of the community has expressed sort of this resilience to EDI talk. And it doesn't, they're like, it's like ducks, it just kind of sheds off them and they don't understand it. And so I hear, and I really love the collection of, life experience, within the community. But I'm wondering if there's any part in the process where, I've been in corporate America for 30 years, so I've had lots of training. And I'm an extremely liberal person, and I learn something every time I hear it. So I'm wondering if there's any thought to educating the part of the community that's more resilient to that type of open-minded discussion that you're having, or if this is more trying to create resources for the BIPOC community. Both. So resist. What I mean by that is, I guess I don't really mean actively resistant.
So you meant resistant, not resilient.
Well, what I mean is that it flows over some people, where it's, I don't understand it, so I reject it. Or I don't appreciate it, so I reject it. And I don't really want to say, that it's, stubborn resistance or anything like that. It's more I don't see a need for it. You hear it at council, and that's why, and I don't want to, I'm also saying, I don't want to categorize it as necessarily, bad intentions, coming from these people. It's just an unfamiliar, and so I guess I meant sort of, like that's why I'm saying it's more like they have duck feathers to the concept where it just kind of washes over and it's not, it's not absorbed or it's not heard. And I think that, I mean, they used to just, it was called diversity training or, you know, and people have, you know, pejoratives for it too, that when they don't like it, but I'm just, I guess my question is this to create resources within the city, you know, budget kind of and resources for the BIPOC community? Or is there also an educational outreach for the rest of the community? Either people that are interested in hearing about what the community is doing, but also so that people whose ears might not be as, or their hearts might not be as open, or their minds to it, so that you can, you know, have a taste for it. Because like I said, if you're not in corporate America, you're not getting this training, you know? And so it's more that question. I'm just, it's kind of a detailed question more than a.
So we approach this process with the knowledge that Loveland, I call it purple. We have some very conservative elements. We have some very liberal elements. We have some moderate individuals. And that was what we wanted to find out, was how do we approach, as you said, education, support for different segments and things. And that's why we brought in not only people of the BIPOC community, but we interviewed the Chamber of Commerce. We interviewed the LBDC, the Rotary. We asked them to come in and do an interview with us so that we could hear different voices and understand what the view was of the whole community. And we had also heard when we did our community conversations that yes, people wanted to see more diversity, but there was also, we'd like to be safer and things like that. So the goal is to create prototypes that support the whole community. You know, one of the prototypes is mobile outreach. What does that look like for the community? What does that mean? And that can serve a large different groups of people. You know, the data hub is how do we know what's going on, but also how do we support people who may be going for grants, who need information that may not have a lot of the data, or a lot of especially small nonprofit groups. They're doing great work out there, but they don't have all the tools and everything.
Just to clarify that, yeah, that part I understand. What I mean more is, and it might go into a conversation, is where it would go, is that you're identifying a need and you know, lived experiences. And but is there a way to create the engagement between the community that is underserved or under-recognized and the larger Loveland community that may include an array of opinions on how people live their lives?
That's what we do hope to hear in like the Harwood model.
That's okay. So
that is, so one of these was very focused on a specific project. The Harwood model, we've done larger community conversations. We have a great one. About 3 years ago, there was an event outside the library where somebody called a patron racist names. And that brought us together with the Loveland police force, where we talked about safety in general. And we got a lot of feedback, and we have the report available if anybody would like to take a look at it. And again, there was comments about communication and things like that. We have also tried to do more facilitated conversations on tough topics. And that was before COVID, where we would invite people in, and that's done by the National Issues Forum, where you can bring people together and things like that. We had not had a lot of response to that. So there are avenues for us to use the skills that we have, as you said, to bring people together in that larger conversation.
thanks.
Okay.
Actually, just one story. Do you know if the city has any, I mean, as a city employees, I mean, you guys are city employees, do you have any diversity training? You get that?
I believe Steve can answer that question.
So we've had training in the past on other topics similar to that. About 2 years ago, we started working on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. On Martin Luther King Day this year, we started our process internal to the staff. We're working now through that process. We have a consultant coming to help us. We're going to be doing an engagement survey amongst the staff first. And then depending on the results of that, we'll have small group training that will be hosted by our HR group that is coming in to specifically help us. And then the idea is to, at the same time, and we'll be coming back to council. I just looked up here, April 12th, to talk a little bit more about outreaching. One of the first things we did is establish Juneteenth Day as a holiday in our city. And so we have that going. And so this is a building process for us. I was in earlier processes with Fort Collins almost 5 years ago and know that we have a long way to go, but we are now on a journey. And so there'll be learning for our staff because we have a lot of front-facing staff that work in different departments and are direct contact with the public every day. We need to be aware of what we are doing and how we're doing that and how we can do it better. And so this is what this will all do.
Combine it all. That's right.
Yeah. And then the other thing, if I can add to your question, the reason we chose the library is that they did develop trusting relationships with some of the community members we're trying to reach out to that probably won't come to one of these groups that you're working on right now, one of the 5 groups, right? And so that is why we're creating a separate venue to using those trusting relationships they've already developed through a couple of years to have a smaller work group, a different format for it, and to get their feedback as the underserved part of our community.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. I have a couple of questions, and just so everyone knows the order that I currently have written down, after me, it'll be Black, Scholl, then Ward. So I may have just not heard it. Sometimes whenever we're doing all this stuff, I'm having to look around to see if anybody's raising their hand. So I apologize if this was already said. Where can we find the information on upcoming discussions for this Harwood initiative that you guys have?
So we would be working with Nicole to publicize this. We are working with the police department currently to do kind of this Harwood model at the end of March. We're just waiting for the approval of the questions that we submitted. We take the format of the questions that are recommended and develop them to be focused specifically on that. We were just talking actually when we came in about getting the publicity out for that and getting all of that. So that's what we hope. And then we also, Nicole will call us in. As Amber said, we worked with teen vaping and we helped facilitate the conversation not only with the people who sell the products, but also with families who had been impacted. And that was all publicized through Nicole's office. So.
Okay, thank you. And as far as, if let's say we were to vote on it or we were able to get city council to agree on it, what have you, would it be possible for us to have a discussion on racial profiling and policing?
We could work to develop specific questions. Again, these are more open-ended questions.
Right.
Like, what do you aspire for? And for the questions that we were looking at, we asked about 3 questions, so they tend to be broad in nature. One of the questions that we asked that we submitted to the police for the session was, what could be done to see progress in 6 months? How would you see progress in 6 months? But we could definitely work with you and develop those questions and figure out how the best way to approach that.
Right. And I apologize. My language is definitely very blunt of just, let's talk about racial profiling. So I apologize. But, I do know from what was in the Jensen Hughes report, it was mentioned that, there are a lot of people in the BIPOC community who feel like, at times they get treated differently because of the color of their skin from law enforcement. So I think that would be very important discussion. So I just wanted to see if that'd be something that fell under that, but that answers my question. Thank you. All right, Commissioner Black.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. This is so informative. So I want to ask about the session with the LPD that you're working on with them. Is that going to be online, Amy?
At this point in time, we're hoping to do it in person.
Okay.
And we haven't talked really about the hybrid model, which is a possibility that we could do, where we have people online and then we send them off into small groups. That is how we worked with Nicole last year, was to do it online. We have the technology to do it, so it's definitely something we can consider, and I will definitely write that down as a follow-up item for us as we're planning this event.
Right. And so obviously, because it's the Harvard method and it's a community engagement event, I assume that it would be open to all community members and advertised as such?
Absolutely.
Okay. And how many people would you, what kind of venue, where would that be held?
Well, right now we're looking at our Gertrude Scott room in the library, and we can manage, because we have a limited number of facilitators, is really our limitation. We can manage about 30 people.
About 30 people.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's just
Okay.
because right now we only have 3 trained facilitators. We are asking Steve for additional funds to help us get more trained. And we also have some other training in process as well.
Fantastic. And another question. So City Manager Adams mentioned that the city is taking some of the findings with your work with certain stakeholders in the community. And that's one of my questions. Is City Council, the city, and LPD, what have they taken from your findings from all these previous years of engagement with community? How is that being given to them? Are they asking for it? Is it given in a report? Or do they engage anybody from city LPD in previous community engagement sessions? How is that, and including city council?
So we always try to report back with a report. I do know that from our safety conversation we had in the past, that one of the changes that took place was that they did have received their own public information officer, so that they could start doing better communication than what they had previously. So I do know that there have been action items out there. For some of the others, it was informational. For the city council, we reported back out for the teen vaping, what did the vendors say? What did the families say? And they used that information to decide what they would move forward in the way of licensing and things like that. So there has been action items that have resulted because of that.
Fantastic. And one last question. Thank you. Have you done one on trust? One of these engagement events on trust between the community and city/LPD?
At this point in time, we have not been requested to do one.
Okay, but that would be something that would be an appropriate topic for one of these engagement events.
Yes.
Correct?
And again, that goes back to Commissioner Pryor's question. We can definitely sit down and figure out what you guys want and how we can do this.
Everyone's just doing so much homework today. Okay.
Homework, Chair Pryor. Well, thank you for your time. I greatly appreciate it. Thanks for all your work at the library, and Amber as well. I appreciate it. I love my library.
All right. Yes, city manager.
So thank you real quick. One of the other topics we worked on was metro districts. And again, to the question of what was done with that information, talking to over 100 people, which pressed us to have all of our engagement folks available. We had another one that was available that's not now. But that was used to develop the policy we're working on right now for metro districts. So as a follow on to some other questions that council had about that topic. So we do use the information, and that's a really reliable way for us to find it.
Thank you, City Manager. Okay. And this will probably be our last 4 commissioners, just for the sake of time. So we have Scholl, Ward, Hildebrand, Bullard.
Thank you. I'll be quick since Commissioner Black and you kind of answer my question. I think what you're doing is really cool. I mean, it's difficult. But the question I had is related to that. When you're kind of seeking, I'm trying to understand it a little bit deeper. When you have a specific question like metro districts or racial profiling or what, you don't, it's not kind of a blast invitation of anyone from the community, is it? Or I'm just trying to understand your method of how you get people to come in and talk, because in my world, it's really hard to do because people are generally pretty ambivalent for the most part. And how do you what motivates somebody to come down to the library and say, I'll share an hour of my time? And can you walk? I just wanted to learn more about that
We
process.
do a blast invitation. Again, we work closely with Nicole's team. We also have an internal team that helps us with our marketing as well. And we send it out through our channels and things like that. What we hope is that people are significantly engaged in the community and wants to contribute their voice. Also, as Amber mentioned, we are kind of considered a neutral spot. So that also encourages people who might not otherwise want to engage with the city in other ways, you know, where they've had interactions or we've been out the community with them and things. You know, in the case of teen vaping, that was one where we focused on two separate groups. We did do a selective invite for the retailers and then the families. For the metro districts, it was a blast email and people came and talked, and some of the questions were easy to answer, some of them were not. What we also found out a lot of from that conversation was people did not understand what metro districts were. I'm still confused and I live in one and I've gone through that. So we really tried to send out the invitation, and it's an invitation to invite you into this, to have your opportunity to have a voice, to sit down, as Amber said, with that kind of kitchen table conversation.
Sure.
And so it's a little different from surveys and things like that, where somebody can just click and go in. It does require people to give an hour to an hour and a half of their time to do that. But again, we have some pretty topics that are really, people are really engaged with and want to do that. Am I going to reach the person who's ambivalent on metro districts? Probably not. Am I going to reach somebody who just wants information about it? Yes. And usually what the format is on meetings like that is we have a presentation of like the planning commission or people involved in that to give the background information before we go into the discussion. So people have some information and a context to put it in.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, I do understand that having a deeper conversation with 30 people can be more powerful than having a shallow one with 300. And how, you know, in the community engagement. So no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Right. Commissioner Ward.
Thanks, Commissioner Ward. Thank you, Amy and Amber and Nicole, for being here and answering all these questions. Excuse me. Mike asked one of my questions, so I won't have to do that one. The town halls that you guys did that were virtual, you said you did 4 of them. Could you just run over the topics? Just list the topics.
Yeah, I'm going to have Nicole.
Okay.
The first one was metro districts. I forgot our summer one. I will look. And then we did one on business development. So we had economic development and development services talk about that process. And then we ended the year with affordable housing.
Okay.
And then our first one for 2022 in May will be on homelessness. So I'll look for that fourth one.
And the fourth one that you can't remember.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. And then this is just a plug. You were talking, well, I would like to know where to find some of these reports. Like the safety one, the DEI one, where are they living?
I will work to get them up on our website.
Okay.
We had the overall one that we did in 2019 that was the aspirations one. I've just been waiting for the final report from somebody for the DEI one. And then we can definitely get the police one out, or we can send it specifically to this group for you guys to review, which is probably would be the.
That would be good.
That would be good because it is about 3 years old. Yeah. And there have been other things that have happened in that.
That was the safety one, right?
That was the safety one.
I think I attended that one. That was in the before times.
Yeah.
Okay, before times. And then my other thing is sort of a plug on that. City manager, you mentioned that you're going to do some DEI training with staff. You're going to start rolling that out. I would suggest that at some point you include all the boards and commissions and city council and any other voluntary groups as money and time and, certainly not, 10 days worth, but some level of might be helpful. That's really all I had. Thank you.
If I can add.
Sure thing.
We have our executive leadership team and our council is going to do it together. We're going to go be a cohort.
Great. Thanks.
All right, Commissioner Hildebrand.
Okay, so I figured out yours. You sound like you do them once every 3 months or so. But how often does the library have their community? I'm sorry, were you going to respond? Oh.
We were supposed to have a fourth one in the summer, and my apologies, that was replaced by the two LPD town halls that were facilitated by Jensen Hughes.
So how often does the library host the community conversations?
We do it as needed.
Okay. And so then how specifically are this topics chosen? So does like a citizen come to you and be like, oh, I have a question about this? Or is it like come from the city down?
We choose the topics. Our set of questions that we did in 2019 was on the aspirations of the community. We wanted to hear what the community wanted, what they saw. We did that in multiple formats. One is a 4-question aspiration question. One is a hour-long conversation that has about 10 questions to it. And then we were at a lot of the different fairs and events and things, and we had sticky notes for 4 questions. So that was how we got so much input through that. We specifically decided to work with the police because of the concern of the community around the episode outside of the library, that we wanted to talk about safety and things. So we reached out to the police and we said, we think this is a good idea. The city also reaches out to us when they need our assistance on specific town halls and things. And like I said, for the specific one that I talked about, we wanted to have a response that was Loveland based, as opposed to trying to come in and say, oh, this was done in Denver or this was done in Lakewood, where it's a completely different community.
And so could certain groups or citizens come to the library and ask you guys to be like, oh, I'd really like to have this conversation. Could you guys facilitate it? Like, would that be an option for citizens?
We can definitely explore that.
Oh, okay.
We haven't done it in the past, but it doesn't mean we can't do it in the future. COVID really put a dent in what we could do. Because again, some people prefer in person and some people prefer virtual, and we wanted to make sure we had as big as reach as we possibly can. So that's definitely something we can have a discussion about and to see how it fits in and where we can go from there.
Okay. And I feel like I'm kind of getting the same answer for everything, but, and now I just lost it. But you're always like, oh, we'll look into that. But so since there's only 3 facilitators, correct?
Currently.
So what, realistically, could you guys do? Like, could you do a conversation every month? Or would it be more like Miss Yost, where it's every 3 months? Like, realistically, what do you think your staff could do?
Realistically, I would say it would probably be every other month. And that's partially because we do want to do things like we want to advertise it. We want to invite it in. We want to make sure it is relevant to the community as the community sees it and things. So, and for us to prepare. It's 3 facilitators. We usually have 3 note takers as well. So we have to, again, balance our limited amount of time and things. So we are working, like I said, on a completely different model for training for facilitation to get people up to speed. so that they can assist us with conversations and things like that as well. So I would say probably every other month.
And then, so it is like the personnel in the library who decides like this is a valid question or it's not necessarily valid for our community, right? Is that what I'm?
Well, again, if we feel we see a need and it's something like we use this method for our strategic planning. But again, Nicole can come to us and say, we really want to work with groups in the city. And that's why we're here before you to talk about this process, that if you feel this could be a valuable process, we will definitely work with you to develop the questions and how we're going to advertise it and who you'd like to invite in and things like that. So, and that's where we're at right now. We had just really, like I said, taken off. We'd done a great job in 2019. We had great plans for 2020. As I said, I literally had finished a conversation with the Chamber Lunch and Learn. And it must have been March 11th or March 12th, because I can remember finishing up with this aspirations exercise with that group, because they invited me in to ask me about the fact that we'd like to know what the business community thinks. And I remember finishing up and somebody coming in and saying, oh, my office just shut down. So that's a great example of a group coming to us saying, we've heard about this model and we'd really like to work with you on it. And we really think it would be valuable to hear the voices of the business community specifically.
All right. And the last question of the evening goes to Catherine Bullard.
Hi. I think I heard you say that you're looking to train some more facilitators. I think that's great. I am so impressed with the library, and it's kind of a feeling about just being a community center. And that there's so many groups that I think use that so well. Whether it's folks who need a computer or just a quiet place to read, or just so many other things. And I'm so thrilled that you have Homeward Alliance working through that. And even with the mobile laundry, what a crazy idea. And it's so important to so many people. But my question then is, with Homeward Alliance and the thing that they do with that on Thursdays, that and I trying to get people's help in various ways. Have you been able to use, or is it appropriate for you to use some of the learnings that Homeward Alliance has had in their dealings? Do you understand my question?
Yes, we are actually thrilled that Homeward Alliance is operating in Loveland and working to kind of unify all of the work that we have been doing. And I will put a disclaimer that I know Commissioner Bullard from years of working on the homeless issue in Loveland. So I also know where she's coming from. And what, again, we would definitely want to work with them. Nicole said, looking at homelessness is a very charged question here in Loveland and things. So that would be a great opportunity to work with Homeward Alliance. And what we might do in that case would be that we might interview the people who are actually providing the services to get their views, their aspirations for the community. And then we might open it up for a larger group within the community to hear that. And then we have two data sets, as I would call it, that we can look at and say, okay, are these meshing? Are these people doing what the community wants? Is there a gap in their knowledge and things? And that goes back to the public knowledge type thing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. I want to just thank all three of you again for giving us your time today. A lot of really good information. And you guys are more than welcome to stick around for the last 15 minutes and watch us plan our agenda. If you want to, or if you want to go home, we completely understand, but
Thank you.
Thank you. real quick, you guys, just because time, I move that we extend our meeting 15 minutes. All right. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, well, if you have to go back to work, that's okay. Okay, the motion passes by majority vote. Okay, so I don't even think that we'll need the full 15 minutes. Okay, so for next meeting, what is that, March 21st? You know, I think that we take this information that we got today and we, you know, kind of wrap our heads around what can we do with these resources. I mean, I believe it was Commissioner Black who had said something about having I just wrote it down here just a second ago, but basically having like a sit down talk. Commissioner Black, actually, would you feel free to talk about what that idea was? Because I can't find it in my notes, but you had an idea about us having a sit down with the Harwood method and having a discussion.
Yeah, I agree. You know, Commissioner Scholl mentioned something about the difference between engagement and communication or something like that. And I completely agree. There has to be engagement between our community and the LPD and city, in my opinion, to regain some trust. And I worked with the Center for Public Deliberation on facilitating events just like this Harwood. So I'm a huge proponent of it. I think it works. It sounds like the library would be in support of that. Sounds like city manager would be in support of that. And it also sounds like that the LPD is working with the library on setting something up for the end of March. And I sit on the community engagement group and have heard nothing of the sort. So that was kind of news to me. But I do believe that would be my opinion for a recommendation, is to absolutely get one of those into the works.
Excellent. Okay. I'm opening up the floor to everyone to speak, but you know, again, I think just kind of taking what we learned today and then figuring stuff out with it.
Commissioner Mayor had a point earlier with Nicole's. No, I was just kind of going about, I mean, the Nicole Yost who had presented, I mean, you had said kind of after, and I would agree with you, and he said, when can we do that again? And I kind of think maybe as a group, we should go on the Loveland site and kind of explore it a little bit and look at it and kind of try to get an understanding of maybe how we might use it. And what kind of questions that we would ask. I'm not, and it's not, I think that's something we can do a lot quicker than the Hargrove methods. It seems like they have capacity issues. But you know, I do think there's some questions, because it's at some point, I think I'm kind of want to start to have the conversation of more deeply of kind of what are we doing? I mean, as our commission, I mean, you know, they have a trust and engagement group. I mean, the police chief has spoken. I'm just trying to understand kind of what value add are we providing to both the city council and the community going forward, and it's important. And so I think I'd like to kind of think of, help me understand that question. I mean, if there's how we kind of define our role within that, and you know, given everything else that's going on. So
I think we could break that down kind of into two parts. So we could request now what she offered, doing the videos and just putting up all the information that we've gathered so far. I can update that little report thing that I did and have that on there as well for like a quick summary for people. I think that's the first or one part of it. And then I think the second part is more surveys and the engagement part of it. Once people have information that they can see, it'll be easier for them to engage with us as we then go and build. So I think I would like to request, or maybe I need to make a motion, that we ask the city to put that first, or go ahead with that first step. So can I do that? I move that we request the city put up the videos and the other information that we talked about. We can clarify that. onto the Let's Talk now, and then we go ahead and figure out surveys later. Yeah, the CTC landing page, put it on Let's Talk. So they offered that to put up our YouTube videos of that. So that just gets us one step forward now.
Do you want me to
Do you want me to
clarify that?
Go ahead.
So you are moving that we ask the city to start basically our profile page with Let's Talk Loveland and upload all of our meeting videos that we've had up to this point, as well as any materials that we may have gathered up to this point.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a question or have some input?
Sure.
I have the site pulled up here. I've been looking at it through the meeting. They set it up as, this is Commissioner Ward. They set it up as projects. And so right now they've got like, I think 6 different projects on there. So would we be an additional project? Is that how because they've got, and it is on the landing page. If you Google Let's Talk Loveland, this is where you go. So what they've got is affordable housing. Tell us what do you want to know about the budget? Fake or fact, which is just sort of a potpourri of everything. The Garfield Harrison Road project or sewer project, metro districts, and the citywide traffic study. So those are the ones that are up there now as projects. And so we would be a project in addition to that. Okay, good. I like that. And I've used this site, actually. They were responsive to my questions pretty quick. So it was a while ago, but it was pretty neat, I thought.
So then we need to vote. Get a second.
Well, I moved it, so.
I'll second it.
Okay, so you'll second it.
Can I
Or more
Yes.
discussion. We can
have more discussion?
Yeah, of course.
Is a proceduralist or maybe.
You're good. Thank you, Shane.
I don't want to, I'm not saying this because I'm against the motion. I just want to offer, maybe there's a different approach. Because I think, not to say that if we get one bite at the apple, I want it to be kind of take a little bit more of a thoughtful approach. But I'm wondering is, instead of just asking if we put up videos, if maybe this is the point where we could maybe appoint a subcommittee of a few people to ask if we could work with Nicole to build a project site specific to what we're doing that would include more than just the videos. Because I just think that we should be more than that. And
right.
And I don't, and again, I don't say that because I'm not opposed. I want it to be when we're engaging in the community, I want it to be very direct, pointed, and purposeful.
So maybe after this motion, you could bring up your own motion about subcommittees, potentially.
Or subcommittee, singular.
Subcommittee, excuse me, but yes.
So just more quick discussion. I'm more adamant about pushing things through because of our timeline and because things end up kind of getting buried. So that's why I think, but I agree with you. I think we definitely need to just get it going and get a good engagement, or else it's just going to flop. Yep.
Hold on. Commissioner Hildebrand actually had her hand up. Sorry. I have you on here.
I'm like both. I'm more like you than Mike, but I've learned a lot because I usually do push things through really fast, and I know especially on websites, if I push things through fast on our business, it backfired most of the time because I felt like, well, that doesn't represent us. So I feel like maybe even if like people who want to push it through real quick, even if we use like the next 2 weeks before the next meeting to kind of come up with a good plan, so we feel like what goes out to the city really represents the CTC and is done in a way that the city will take us seriously, I think that would be helpful. So, but we'd have to push it through really fast.
Okay, I withdraw my motion.
Okay.
I would like to make a new motion. I move that we make a subcommittee right now that can work on this in the next 2 weeks.
Okay. Natalie, I know your comment was probably about the
Sorry.
last thing, but
Yeah, I mean, go ahead with the subcommittee motion and then
Okay.
when you have a broader comment. I mean, there's a saying, fast, good, or cheap, pick two. So.
Right. And then real quick, Commissioner Black, is your hand up for the previous motion that was discarded, or is your hand up for what we're talking about now with the subcommittees?
I'm in favor of the subcommittees. I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Scholl's, like, what are we doing? What's our goal? I'm all for getting community feedback. That's what the city wanted. Some of these surveys, the Let's Talk has a Q&A section. The facilitated Harwood engagement groups. Those are the only ways we're going to get additional community feedback. So I'm in favor of however we can get more community feedback ASAP.
Yes, I still have you down for your actual question. Okay. Does anybody have anything else to add before we vote on subcommittee? Excuse me. Yes.
Just a procedural question. How does that work without?
Microphone, please.
I'm sorry. With the subcommittees, how does that work with open meetings and how many would be in this committee? And it would just be 2 people in this whole committee?
Just announce.
You just have to.
You have to just announce it
Mhm.
and so it could be, how many people are we talking? Can we put that into motion? Subcommittee of this many people?
We should ask who would want to be part of it.
Available, interested.
Yeah, I think after we vote on this, we can see who wants to volunteer for it. But yeah, if it doesn't matter, as long as we let the public know, then I don't think the number matters of who's going to be on it or not.
It was a subcommittee of 2.
Fair, very fair.
So how do I vote? Yeah.
Okay, keep
Yes.
discussion. Who is interested in being on a subcommittee for this project? We have 3 volunteers.
Cool.
Okay.
Yes,
Plus me.
yes.
4 volunteers.
Okay, so we would have 4 people on. So we would have 4 people on said subcommittee. Okay.
Moved.
Yes. Okay. All those in favor of our 4-person subcommittee, please raise your hands. Yep. It passes unanimously. Excellent. Okay. All right. Commissioner Walsh, you had a question.
I had a comment to your original thing that you framed in terms of should we use our next meeting for planning? And I wanted to distinguish, I agree with my Commissioner Scholl. I think we should all go home and look at the website and acquaint ourselves with what it does. My impression from their presentations is these are really good tools. And had City Council familiarize themselves with it before they created the Trust Commission, I think they may be scratching the itch they were trying to, at least supposedly in retrospect, ask us to do. We still have our original language ordinance. And I'm a proceduralist, so as far as I'm concerned, that's all we have authority to do. We don't have the authority to do the things that they're doing. So we're using these tools to do the surveys and the outreach, and everyone should be interested in the Trust Commission, in the information that the Trust Commission has, been developing. But I think we need, we've spent, I don't know how many weeks it's been, I don't know how many weeks it's been, 7 and
10
years.
10 meetings.
I think we still need to take what we have, go through the pillars, figure out what our report is, and that goes to, and then when you create a public interface like that, you have to know who you are before you make an announcement to the world. There's who I am. And so I think that we have to go through this exercise of, what are we doing? We have a dangling question about the internal affairs report and then the people that we want to talk to after that internal affairs report. But we need to define who we are, because otherwise I think people will go to the that, and if they just see a bunch of, 4-hour long meetings that they don't want, they'll be like, I'm not interested in this. And it doesn't, present our best selves, and we haven't gone through that exercise yet, so we don't know who we are. So I think that I love the idea of subcommittee to identify activities that we can use, to distribute, to sell the message. But I'm not so sure that we all agree that we have an ongoing purpose that would be, to me, the handoff from us is we get to August, we write our little report, and in my view, it's a very little report. It's not a report, it's a story. We're not professional report writers, we're not auditors, we are not examiners. So we're going to tell the story of what we did, and we're going to and make these specific recommendations we come out with. But in my view, these are the people and these are the portals for this ongoing trust development versus us. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm that's not my thing, so I wouldn't. But, and I think we have to have those discussions. So it's like, we have to define who we are. And I think that two things in combination for our next meeting, if that makes sense. I mean, it's been.
Yeah, so I think more what you're looking at, because I think we all agree that based off of what the ordinance says, we have a purpose. I think you're wanting to look at more of what are our goals? What are we trying to do with our time and with the information that we have?
Yes.
Okay. Just making sure that I had that right. Commissioner Stoddard?
Excellent time for a follow-up. I agree completely. One of the things that we had talked about a couple of months ago was seeing what interface there was with the police commission.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether you've had a chance to meet with anybody from there or not, but if it would be possible to have some information about I'm not sure I have a good idea of what they do.
Right.
But I think that in terms of our recommendations, one of the things that kind of hangs out there in my mind is some kind of a recommendation in terms of the scope and responsibilities, and particularly in community communications maybe, but if it would be possible that for you or someone to meet with the police commission and then be able to report back to us at the next meeting in terms of what do they do and what's the breadth, and so that we have a better understanding of that.
Real quick,
Just
let
to
me.
follow up, when you're talking PCAB, the
Yes.
Citizens
Oh, advisory board. Yeah.
Yeah, I just attended my first meeting with them, and I could just tell you, I've got a lot of follow-up to do, but there is a group that Lieutenant Bob Schaefer put together, and they attended their first meeting tonight, and they are looking very specifically at how the group is looking at how to implement Section 5 of the Jensen Hughes report that pertains specifically to PCAB. So I should be able to speak more to that next time.
That'd be great.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
we talked about having others speak to their experience with these groups.
Yeah. I am curious real quick, city manager, what is the status on, because you had mentioned me meeting their chair. They have a chairperson as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so is there a status update as to,
I've provided cell phone numbers to each of you to call each other. So.
Oh, okay. I'll need to go through my email again then.
Yeah, please, and if you need, I'll send it again.
Yes, please.
But I would, if I could add, section 5, 5.1, 5.2, 5.3 specifically talks about what the PCAB should be in the future and and they're going to look at that. This group will look at that. So, and we have trust committee presence in that group. So I'm not sure if the trust commission wants to take that on as a separate topic, even though it's one of those 5 areas that's going to be looked at.
All right. So based off the things that I've heard today, because I know that we're running short on time and I don't want to make y'all stay any later, we're going to based off of what Commissioner Walsh had said, kind of look at our purpose moving forward. You know, what are our goals? What is it that we're trying to do? Find that identity, like Mike Scholl had mentioned. And then I will also carve out a little bit of time for you to talk about PCAB if you feel comfortable doing so.
And the others too. who have
Yes.
attended those groups.
Well, no, I was talking about, you had mentioned talking about PCAB. Yeah, okay.
And
yes.
And Commissioner Bullard, there are other things besides the whole issue, all of the issues around police and all of those issues, but there are other things that people are concerned about looking into as well, which we haven't even talked about. So I'm not sure how that happens, but.
I think
Yeah, that's a tough one because we've kind of gone back, we've kind of played a cat and mouse game of look at what the ordinance says, look at, you know, so on and so forth. So I think for right now, we're just sticking with the main problem at hand. And once we have a little bit more room to be able to venture out in that, maybe we create a subcommittee for a different topic. Yes. Oh, yes.
April 22nd is your next report to City Council.
Got it.
Thank you.
And it will be all virtual because we mentioned before, we want to improve our communication with the community. We're completely gutting all the video and stuff in this room and going to change around.
just for the scheduling, that could you, do we know when the internal affairs report's coming out?
And on that note, it's 8:45, meeting over, meeting adjourned.